Using a list of adjectives to describe your noun is a great elaboration technique. But I always find it hard to know, when do you use commas in your list of adjectives, and when do you all just put them in a row without commas separating them? Whenever you use more than one adjective to describe something, when you run several adjectives together in a list, you must decide whether or not you need to use commas to separate the adjectives. Do we write 5 slimy green four-eyed monsters? No commas. Believe it or not, there are some guidelines for this. There are 2 tests, and both of them should give you the same result. Here's test number 1. You need to separate the adjectives in a list of commas if the sentence you're writing still makes sense when you change the order of the adjectives. Let's look at an example. The green, slimy, hungry Martian entered the classroom, grabbed Claudette, and took her to lunch at Bernie's Burger Emporium. All right, our adjectives, green, slimy, and hungry, all describe the Martian. They're separated by commas here. That's because I can change the order in the sentence, and the sentence still makes sense. You might like one version better than the others, but it still makes sense. I can say, the hungry, slimy, green Martian entered the classroom. Or I can say, the slimy, green, hungry Martian entered the classroom. All of those make sense, and so there needs to be a comma between each of those 3 adjectives. Note there's not a comma between the last adjective, like in the first sentence, hungry, and the word Martian, which is the word all of those adjectives are modifying. There's no comma right before the noun. Rule number 2 is you need a comma separating the adjectives if the sentence makes sense if you insert the word and between the adjectives. For example, while writing his final exam, a pale, sweating, panicked student stared at his sentence, trying to decide if a comma was necessary between 2 adjectives. If I insert the word and between the adjectives, does the sentence make sense? If so, I need to have commas when I remove the and. I can say, while writing his final exam, a pale and sweating and panicked student stared at his sentence. Again, you may think one sounds better than the other, but they both make sense. And because of that, you need to have commas if you don't have the word and separating the adjectives. You need pale, comma, sweating, comma, panicked. And then there's no comma between the last adjective in the list and the word they modify, student. Let's give the tests a whirl with this sentence. 5 flashy sports cars passed poor Jared, who rattled down the interstate in his ancient piece of junk. Do we need commas between the adjectives that modify the word cars? For test number 1, we ask, can we change the order of those 3 adjectives and still have the sentence make sense? What if I said, flashy sports 5 cars passed poor Jared? Whoa, that does not make sense. We don't need commas in our original sentence. Let's try test number 2. If we say 5 and flashy and sports cars passed poor Jared, that also sounds terrible. We can't do that either. Therefore, we were right to not put any commas between those 3 adjectives. It's just 5 flashy sports cars passed poor Jared. No commas. So let's go back to our original question. Where do you put commas in the list of 5 slimy green four-eyed monsters, if anywhere? Let's put it to the test. We can change some of the adjectives. We can take 5 slimy four-eyed green monsters, or we can say 5 green four-eyed slimy monsters. But the one thing we can't do is say slimy 5 green four-eyed monsters. That's just weird. We need to have the 5 in front and there's not going to be any comma between 5 and whichever of the other adjectives comes in front of it. Let's see if that works with test 2. I can't say 5 and slimy and green and four-eyed monsters. The and doesn't really fit between the number and the slimy. But I can say 5 slimy and green and four-eyed monsters. So the answer is there's no comma between 5 and whatever adjective comes next. But between slimy, green, and four-eyed, whichever order they're in, there needs to be commas or after the first two. And then, of course, there's no comma right before monsters, which is the word they're modifying. Here's the final answer at the top.